Today, aircraft carriers are the visible symbol of naval power, just like battleships were a century ago. Nations that can deploy these mighty vessels halfway around the world show all nations that they are a global power. Whether they support allies, warn hostile nations, or just impress guests and visitors, they project influence and power. Today, only 3 nations in the world can globally deploy carriers around the world. Let's quickly look at these before we focus on Carrier Strike Group 25. The United States deploys numerous large and medium-sized aircraft carriers around the world as part of their daily operations. The US Navy is unchallenged in both the number of carriers that can be deployed and its global support infrastructure to enable them to deploy these assets anywhere in the world they wish to sail. France has 1 medium-sized nuclear-powered aircraft carrier and the escorts and support vessels to deploy it around the world, just like they did in 2024. The United Kingdom has 2 modern medium-sized carriers and a limited number of escorts and support vessels to enable global deployments. This was first demonstrated by HMS Queen Elizabeth's global deployment 4 years ago, and now, this year, with Carrier Strike Group 25 and HMS Prince of Wales. Other nations do have aircraft carriers. China has several medium-sized carriers, Russia has 1 medium-sized floating disaster zone, and numerous nations have 1 or 2 light carriers that can carry a limited number of aircraft. China has so far chosen not to deploy their carriers as a global force, as there has been focus to influence events nearer to its shores. However, in future, I believe that this will change as China builds experience with carrier operations. Russia has Admiral Kuznetsov. This ship was actually built in Ukraine when both countries were part of the Soviet Union. As a result, Russia has always had problems with maintaining Kuznetsov to the standard required for it to be reliable for operations. She never goes anywhere without an ocean-going tug. Enough said. Now let's look at the Royal Navy's Carrier Strike Group. We'll look at 4 key material components of a globally deployable carrier strike group: the carrier itself, its air group, the escorting warships, and finally the replenishment ships that provide the fuel and supplies needed to operate thousands of kilometers from its own naval base. We look at the composition of Carrier Strike Group 25 and also compare it to the previous strike group deployment in 2021 and see how the components have changed over the last 4 years. First, the carriers. The 2 Queen Elizabeth class carriers are around 65,000 tons displacement, 284 meters long, and designed to operate around 40 aircraft, including the state-of-the-art F-35B short takeoff and vertical landing variant, supported by airborne early warning and ASW versions of the Merlin helicopter. They can certainly pack a potent punch. Only the US Navy's nuclear carriers and China's single Fujian can carry more. The one deficiency I see in the Queen Elizabeth class is the shortage of point defences, limited to 3 20mm Phalanx guns. There is certainly room for the installation of some C-Scepter VLS cells. This would ensure that the Seaways is not overwhelmed by a drone wave attack. This could be mitigated by having an escort frigate operating close to the carrier, similar to the Type 22s in the Falklands War. But why waste an anti-submarine warfare frigate that the Royal Navy doesn't actually have, when for a few more extra million, the carrier could assist more in its own defence? Another example of the Ministry of Defence penny pinching. But on the whole, they are very capable ships. The Queen Elizabeth class are designed to operate up to 36 F-35Bs each, but given that Britain has only ordered 48 and around 30 to 35 are in service as of May 2025, there is a major shortfall both in the near and long term. For Carrier Strike Group 2021, a US Marine Corps squadron operated on Queen Elizabeth to offset the limited numbers of British operated F-35s. On CSG25, the Prince of Wales is carrying around 24 British F-35s, which is an improvement on the previous deployment, but long-term shortfalls in numbers do remain. Britain may procure more F-35s, but with political and funding uncertainty, the total number that will be ordered is not clear. The Royal Navy is also investigating the possibility of operating various sized drone aircraft from its carriers in order to utilize the space available. Focusing only on Royal Navy warships, Carrier Strike Group 21 had two Type 45 air defense destroyers, HMS Diamond and HMS Defender, and two Type 23 anti-submarine warfare frigates, HMS Kent and HMS Richmond, along with an Astute-class nuclear submarine, HMS Artful. This was a solid core of ships, which offered two ships providing defense against air and submarine threats. Carrier Strike Group 25 has one Type 45 air defense destroyer, HMS Dauntless, and one Type 23 ASW frigate, HMS Richmond, as well as an Astute-class submarine. It's hard to ignore that this is half of what the Royal Navy was able to commit in CSG21. This really highlights the accelerating decline of the Royal Navy surface fleet, with half of the Type 45 destroyers in essential refits, and the elderly Type 23s being retired early at an alarming rate. This is due to MOD being unwilling to commit the money required to keep these aging platforms in service. Britain has engaged with NATO allies, excluding the US Navy, to provide additional warships to increase the number of surface escorts. Whilst new Royal Navy surface ships are under construction, namely the Type 26 anti-submarine warfare frigates and the Type 31 general purpose frigates, if Britain is serious about maintaining force levels, they would have coughed up the money required to keep these Type 23s in service. Let's not forget that the US Navy's Ticonderoga class cruisers are older than the Type 23s, as are the early flight Arleigh Burke destroyers. Arleigh Burkes are not being decommissioned, but instead are being maintained even with a shipyard network that is struggling with capacity. Britain has shipyard capacity, but there is no willingness to spend the money necessary. To sum this up, things are going to get worse for the Royal Navy surface fleet over the next few years, while things improve with the arrival of the new frigate classes at the end of the 2020s. Looking on the bright side, the Royal Navy submarine force is able to contribute an Astute class to the operation. In order to be able to operate thousands of kilometers from their home base, a carrier strike group must be able to carry additional fuel, supplies, and ordnance with them anywhere they sail. This is usually supplied by a large tanker and a solid stores support ship. In Carrier Strike Group 21, this was provided by Royal Fleet Auxiliary Tidespring and RFA Fort Victoria. For CSG25, RFA Tidespring, completed in 2019, will perform the tanker duties. No money is available to maintain and man the only remaining RN Solid Store Support Ship, RFA Fort Victoria. As of 2025, the ship is in reserve in poor material condition and only available in an emergency. A new class of support ship has been ordered, but it will be at least 6 years, in 2031, before these three ships will start to become available. Instead, an ally, the Norwegian Navy's Maud, will sail with the task force. She is a smaller half-sister of Tidespring, but actually carries more solid stores due to Norwegian requirements. Is this lack of an operational store ship critical for the Royal Navy? Only if the Carrier Strike Group requires supplying at sea if they use any ordnance on an opponent, i.e., unless you are very close to a friendly base where you can safely restore, the usefulness of the Carrier Strike Group is significantly diminished by the lack of available support ships. So, let's sum up the key areas we talked about. The Carrier itself is a very capable ship, with penny pinching reducing her survivability compared to most modern aircraft carriers, i.e. minimal point defence systems. 2. For CSG25, Britain can scrape together 24 F-35Bs for the Prince of Wales, which is 2/3 of her designed air group, with no squadrons left to deploy on Queen Elizabeth herself if she needs to be surged in an emergency. So whilst 24 F-35s is an improvement over the previous deployment, clearly these numbers are not ideal. 3. For surface escorts, 3 of the 6 Type 45 air defence destroyers are undergoing essential upgrades, which heavily impacts the carrier strike groups, as their primary mission is to defend aircraft carriers. So realistically, only 1 or 2 of the 3 in-service destroyers would be available for operations. That makes it logical that only 1 would be deployed with the carrier strike group, but this is far from ideal. As for anti-submarine warfare-focused frigates, it's a similar story with only 7 Type 23s available to the Royal Navy. Refitting Type 45, aging Type 23s being reduced in numbers as Britain cannot afford to repair them is the perfect storm for the Royal Navy. 4. As for support ships, Tidespring's availability is not surprising. She is a relatively new tanker, one that has been outfitted with the 20mm Phalanx close-in weapon system, ideal for deploying with the carrier strike group. The lack of an operational solid store ships is extremely unfortunate and shows the UK government is unserious about actual capability. I know I've made a few harsh comments around penny pinching. I mean not spending on what is considered a small thing that in an emergency can have a big impact. I understand that governments, both the current and previous administrations, have to try to balance budget, and the money is tight. However, over the last 3 years, we have seen a return to global tensions not seen since the height of the Cold War. That deserves more attention than it's getting in the United Kingdom for sure, and perhaps other countries as well. Millions not spent on repairing old Type 23 frigates, or keeping Fort Victoria in service, or raising pay and conditions to levels that the crews deserve in order to increase retention may be considered by some in government as the unfortunate consequences of a tough decision. But now is not the time to be just hoping for the best. We also have to be preparing for the worst as well. In conclusion, if you're a glass half full type of person, CSG25 shows that, despite challenges, Britain has ambitions to rebuild a navy with global reach, and is engaging with allies in that endeavour. If you're a glass half empty sort of chap, then the weakness in CSG25 shows that Britain wants to present the facade of a global power, but unlike other countries such as Poland and the Baltic states, is unwilling to actually invest the money necessary in defence to meet their stated goals. In summary, I believe that CSG25 shows that Britain isn't quite there yet when it comes to fielding a fully balanced, truly global strike group, but it's a clear step in the right direction. As for the future, I'm excited to see what a Carrier Strike Group 2031 will look like. Imagine a pair of upgraded, reliable Type 45s, a cutting-edge Type 26, a versatile Type 31, and a brand new solid store ship, bringing true global reach to the Royal Navy. What do you think the future holds for Britain's carrier strike capability? If you found this deep dive informative or thought-provoking, please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more naval analysis and warship insights. Thanks for watching.